What's up guys, my name is Ace, and Modern Warfare has a camping problem. And you can probably already tell this is going to be a pretty heavily opinionated video, unlike a lot of my other videos where I'm just sharing how the game works. Today, I just wanted to talk a little bit about what I feel is a pretty big problem with Modern Warfare. Now, I don't want this video to be a camper hate video, and if you want to camp, by all means, that's fine with me. My problem is more so with the game design actively encouraging slower and camping playstyles, while actively discouraging the more aggressive playstyles. And this isn't about whether or not I'm able to adapt to this playstyle, because I am, and I have, and I can get my streaks up fairly easily by just going into a power position, throwing some claymores down, and locking that down. It's quite easy to do that. Only problem is, I don't enjoy doing that, and I don't feel that particular playstyle should be as dominant as it currently is. Now, before this game came out, one of the things that Infinity Ward was constantly saying in interviews and stuff was that they wanted to make all playstyles viable again. And they were referring to the fact that in many of the recent Call of Duty games, they have moved into a much more rush-heavy sort of a playstyle, where being aggressive and rushing and having really good twitch aim and gun skill was heavily rewarded, and these slower-paced playstyles and locking down power positions had been pushed to the background a lot more. So going into this game, I fully expected a slower-paced game. I expected more campers. I expected that playstyle to be viable again, just like it was back in the old Modern Warfares. I remember back to Modern Warfare 2, you could camp so hard in that game with double claymores, and you had Scavenger to replenish those claymores. You could do that if you wanted to, so I was expecting something similar to that with Modern Warfare, and I'm ready to adapt to that. However, I feel like in the game's current state, they took this so far in the other direction that it's not making every playstyle viable. Instead, they've made the camping playstyle dominant, and they've pushed the more aggressive playstyles into the background. Now, some people really like this style of play, and that's totally fine. I don't want them to completely take that style of play away from people, but like I said, I just feel like they cranked the knob way too far in that direction, to the point where this isn't even recognizable as a Call of Duty game. I've seen some people say that, oh, it's finally back to the old Modern Warfare trilogy and that style of play, and that is not the impression I get at all. I played the crap out of the original Modern Warfare trilogy, and I've gone back several times throughout the years as well, so I know how those games play, and none of them cater as heavily towards camping and punish aggressive play nearly as much as Modern Warfare does. So today, I wanted to address various aspects of this game that are contributing to this camping problem that I see, and I wanted to provide some constructive feedback and criticism as to what I personally would like to see changed to bring it back and truly make all playstyles equally viable again. So the first factor that's contributing very heavily to the camping problem in this game is the map design. The maps in this game tend to be not so linear, a lot of verticality to them, very porous as the developers themselves described it. It's porous to help the lesser skilled players, that's the developers' words, and there's plenty of power positions, lines of sight, visual clutter, and open spaces that you have to get through to get out of spawn or get to objectives. All of this in combination is definitely contributing to the camping issue. The most effective way to play on most of these maps is to get yourself to a power position and then stay there for as long as possible until someone eventually kills you out of that power position. Now, the thing about map design, though, is not much can or will change with the current maps that are in the game. Now, sure, it's probably possible that they could, like, board up a window or add a piece of cover here or there, and who knows, maybe we'll see something like that in the future, but I'm not going to bet on that, and as a result, I've already accepted the fact that these are the maps that are in the game, and I will have to adapt to them. And that's okay, I will adapt to that. However, one thing that's contributing to a lot of the issues that relates to map design as well is the spawns. And the spawns are in a very rough state at this point in the game's life cycle. This is something that I do anticipate will improve over time as they get a lot of data. I've actually noticed that the beta maps, the spawns are actually not as bad on the beta maps on average compared to the other maps, and this is likely due to the fact that they had that time to collect all that data during the beta, and therefore they've made those necessary adjustments. Whereas with the maps that we haven't played in the beta, they're still collecting all of that initial data, and therefore we should expect to see some spawn improvements as time goes on. So that's something that I'm looking forward to. So within the map design topic, there's really not much to say here, not much constructive criticism. Aside from the fact that I really hope we get a good set of DLC maps, I would love to see some solid fan favorite throwbacks from the original Modern Warfare trilogy, and I think that would help please a lot of us in the community that are really not enjoying this style of map design. Now, the next big factor contributing to the camping problem, and this is a pretty big one, this is the lack of stealth options in this game. First up, global footstep sounds are simply too loud and have too large of a radius. You can hear people coming from a mile away, and I've been finding far too many people just sitting in a room, not even trying to lock down a line of sight or anything, just sitting in a corner, listening for footsteps. When they hear those footsteps coming, which they will because they're so loud, they just pre-aim the doorway, they know exactly when to start pre-firing, and you don't stand a chance when you enter that building. Even if you are actively crouch walking to deafen your footsteps to approach those people because you're playing smart and tactically to counter those players, your footsteps are still far too loud, they can still hear you coming just fine, and they'll pick you off and you won't stand a chance. So when it comes to global footstep audio, I would love to see that reduced across the board. I think the level that Dead Silence was at pre-patch, that seems like a pretty good level for footstep audio. If somebody's sprinting up on you, you can still hear them and prepare for them and use your tactics to your advantage to take them out. But if they're approaching more slowly and methodically, like crouch walking for instance, you're going to have a very hard time hearing them coming. And I think that's how it should be. If you're thinking smart and tactically and approaching that situation by crouch walking in order to cut down on your footstep audio, you should be rewarded for that, not the person that's just sitting in a corner waiting for you. Now, on the topic of footsteps, yes, they did buff the Dead Silence field upgrade today. I made a video on it, and I will leave that link down below if you want to check out what it sounds like before and after with Dead Silence. But they made it so Dead Silence is effectively silent now, which was a great change. I really appreciate that. But in my opinion, this isn't enough because you have to wait for this ability to charge up before making any sort of a move. Otherwise, the enemies will be able to pinpoint your exact location, and that's a problem. I've seen a lot of people saying just make Dead Silence a perk again, and while I feel that would be the ideal situation, I kind of doubt they're going to be doing that. So this is why I would prefer them to just completely cut down on the global footstep audio. And then for the people that do want to be completely Dead Silence, they've got that Dead Silence field upgrade. Perhaps they could even buff that a little bit more and make it so you earn it more often, or it has a longer activation duration. Something along those lines could be done. But at the end of the day, the main point here is something else needs to be done with footsteps, in my opinion, to alleviate this camping problem. The next huge problem when it comes to the lack of stealth play, and this is something that I couldn't put my finger on until a bunch of people started mentioning it on Reddit, these are your character callouts. So anytime you hear a character yell, "I'm reloading," or "contact," or "enemy over there," or something like that, that's audible to not only your teammates, but also the enemy players, and you have no control over when your character is going to be saying those things. As a result, I feel this should not be audible whatsoever to enemy players. I've had too many situations where I was sneaking up behind somebody, I was playing tactically and approaching that situation in a tactical manner, and I decide I want to go for one of those execution kills, for instance. But when they turn around and kill me, I watch the kill cam and I can very clearly hear my character shout, "Contact!" as they're walking up behind the guy, which is just ridiculous. Now, some people will say, well, it's not realistic for your teammates to hear those callouts, but not your enemies. I would counter that with, it's not realistic that a soldier in the heat of battle that knows there's enemies in his immediate surroundings would decide to randomly yell, "I'm reloading," so everybody around can hear it. So that one, I feel like, is a pretty easy change. Just make it so the enemies can't hear those callouts whatsoever. And finally, with the lack of stealth, there's one other thing that I discovered is the suppressors do not keep you off the radar when an enemy has a UAV up. Suppressed weapons behave exactly the same when it comes to the compass and the minimap as non-suppressed weapons in all situations. So if you've ever used Ghost and a suppressor and you're trying to flank around the enemies, they call a UAV in, you might be thinking, great, I'm using Ghost so I can stay off the radar. Then you get yourself into a gunfight, you kill an enemy player, maybe you completely take him off guard, shoot him, and he doesn't even know what killed him. You are now showing up on the radar for the enemy players, and there was nothing you could do to keep yourself off the radar in that situation. So this definitely hinders that flanking playstyle when you're trying to sneak up on the people that are camping or locking down a power position. You're trying to get in behind their flank, but you get into a gunfight, and now everybody knows you're there, and your whole plan is spoiled. I'm not really a big fan of how that works in the game's current state. Now, on that topic of the minimap interaction, this brings us to the next reason that I feel camping is more prevalent than ever before in Modern Warfare, and this is the fact that enemy dots don't appear on the radar unless you have a UAV active. Now, I know a lot of people like the minimap this way, where they can fire their unsilenced weapon all they want, and nobody will be able to pinpoint where that shot is coming from exactly by just glancing at their minimap. But at the end of the day, having those dots appear on the radar encourages movement. It makes everyone feel more comfortable and more confident moving from one position to another. As a result, I would love to see them bring those red dots back, but at the same time, buff the suppressors back to the way they have always been in Call of Duty, where if you fire with a suppressed weapon, you don't have a dot that appears on the radar. This sort of a trade-off system has always existed in Call of Duty, and it just works in my opinion. That's a great trade-off that you have. If you want to stay off the radar, use a suppressor. If you don't mind showing up on the radar, then great, you can use that attachment slot for something else. Making a change like this wouldn't significantly hinder the camping playstyle. It's not like suddenly if you flip that switch, then rushers are going to be dominating absolutely everything. It would just make it so people are more confident moving around the map, and it would force those people that do want to stay off the radar to trade something in exchange for that power. So that's another factor and something that I feel could definitely cut down on the camping issue in this game. Another thing that contributes to this is the time to kill, or at least the perceived time to kill or time to death in Modern Warfare is extremely fast with some of the weapons in the game. Now, part of this is partially based on the fact that the connections have not leveled out yet, or at least for a lot of people, they haven't leveled out. For me, for instance, here in Norway, I'm having a ton of issues where I'm dying in the blink of an eye, yet it still takes me 3 to 4 shots to kill the enemy player, and that is purely a connection-based issue. However, part of this is also based on the fact that the headshot multiplier in this game is much higher than we're used to with the more recent Call of Duty games that we've been playing, and therefore guns like the M4A1 can kill in 3 shots instead of 4 as long as you're landing a headshot. Now, when it comes to time to kill, I've been seeing a lot of people call for a slower time to kill. I don't see that coming. That would require them to completely start from scratch on the weapon balancing system and completely rework how everything works and how it balances with each other, so that's not a realistic ask. One thing that's a bit more realistic, though, that I think maybe we could ask for is a slight reduction to the headshot multiplier. Not to the point where headshots don't count anymore, like we've had in the previous years, where we've only had like a 1.1 times multiplier, but instead tune it a little bit more carefully with certain weapons like the M4, for instance, and make it so you have to land at least 2 of your shots to the head instead of just 1 mixed in with their body shots in order to reduce the number of shots it takes to kill. This would cut back on some of those situations where you just get lasered by an M4 and picked off before you even realize you were being shot at. And I think that could be a good way to cut back a little bit on some of the really fast time to kill sort of situations. This brings us to the next factor that contributes to the camping issue in this game. There are a lot of them. This one is just straight up the movement speed. While it is kind of hard to compare movement speed directly across different Call of Duty titles, it really does feel like the movement speed in this game has been cut back compared to recent Call of Duty games, and this has made moving from one piece of cover to another, or crossing a street for instance, a lot more dangerous and a lot more scary, and therefore that leads people to simply not move to that next piece of cover or not cross the street, and instead opt to just stay in the position they're already in. Now, out of all the factors I've mentioned, this one's relatively minor. I mean, it's not the end of the world that we move a little bit slower, but I just wanted to mention that if we moved a little bit faster overall, perhaps people would have a bit more incentive to cross that street. And finally, there's one last factor I wanted to mention in this video that applies to objective game modes, and this is, there's no real incentive to play the objective. If I'm on a little bit of a streak and I'm just a couple kills away from my highest kill streak, and there's an opportunity to capture that B flag in domination, and I see that opening, but there's a bit of risk attached to it, I'm sorry, but I'm not touching that B flag. And I'm somebody that plays to win, I always want to win, but the risk versus reward just isn't there at that point. It's in my best interest to avoid that flag at that point to earn my streak, and then hopefully my streak will help me capture that flag afterwards, but there's no guarantee there. Now, yes, you can use the Point Man perk, which is a tier 2 perk. That is the most powerful tier of perks, by the way. I don't feel like Point Man is worth it by any means, and I don't think we're going to see very many people using that at all. Now, personally, the change that I would love to see here is one of 2 changes. Either make it so you don't need to actually use a perk to get point man, just make it so, just like with specialist, you can select whether or not that class is a point man class or a regular class where you have to get your normal kill streaks. That way you could set up a really objective-oriented class setup that has point man attached to it without sacrificing a perk, and then that would be a great choice for people that love playing the objective super hard. The other option I see is just make it so we have point streaks instead of kill streaks by default. So if you cap the B flag, for instance, in Domination, make that count as 1 kill towards your streak. That was a great system back in Modern Warfare 3. I was really happy when they introduced that, and I was very confused when Modern Warfare came around and we didn't get point streaks for playing the objective. But with that pretty much covers it for all of the factors that I wanted to mention, as well as some of my feedback and constructive criticism that I wanted to provide. At the end of the day, I don't want camping completely eliminated from this game, because I realize there's a big portion of the community that likes that playstyle. All I'm asking for with this video is to dial it back a little bit, to not alienate all of the other playstyles that have traditionally been viable in Call of Duty. Of course, though, I'd like to know in the comment section below, what's your opinion on all of this? Do you agree? Do you think there is a big camping issue in Modern Warfare and that we need to see some significant changes to the game? Or do you disagree? Do you like the game in its current state? Just let me know those thoughts in the comment section down below. If you enjoyed the video, a like rating is always appreciated, and don't forget to subscribe for more if you haven't already. I'll talk to you guys next time.